Yay, there we go. I expect a fanfare, but nothing actually happens. You know, so at the other end of it, I hope there's actual people. Are there people at the other end? Can you see us? We can. Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent. So, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest kind of Digital Lincoln talk online. So I'm not going to jump straight into things, but how is everyone doing? How is everyone doing? Do you want to say hello in the chat? There we go. Good. We've also got Sean. Have you got a camera, Sean, or are you just going to be a voice in the background?
Just a voice in the background.
Just a voice in the background. There we go. Excellent. Can I just check, Tom? How do you pronounce your surname before I get this completely wrong?
No, give it a go. Give it a go. I trust you.
Okay, Geralty.
It's Geralty. Yeah. You're pretty close.
Yeah, Geralty. Okay. I think I was thinking of Geralt of Rivia from a certain computer game. I'm thinking, no, that's not. I'm sure that's not right. I'm sure that's not right. So, what we're going to do tonight is I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction. We've got a couple of messages. I hope everyone's doing all right. We had a bit of our last session was a virtual cafe, and it's kind of similar to this, but we don't have a speaker. So, what happens is I start a conversation off, and then someone joins in, and we pick up a conversation. And actually, it worked quite well. I mean, we started off on kind of technology related topics, and within about 20 minutes we were talking about the end of democracy. So yeah, pretty good actually, pretty good talk. So that's For My Sins. That's available online if anyone wants to watch that one. But the idea here is Tom's going to talk about the fascinating title to the talk: Missile Destroyers, Supercomputers and Chernobyl, which is probably the best title that I have seen on any talk ever. With a little bit underneath it, but might make a bit more sense of that, which is the importance of psychological safety to high-performing teams. Oh, there's things going on in the chat over there as well as the chat over there. I don't know what's going on. And I just got a little announcement about Mosaic and bits and bobs as we go along as well. The last Digital Lincoln event was end of March when we had Tom Austin. Now, Tom Austin was talking about automating UI testing. Really interesting talk, actually. And I wrote down lots of little bits of things that I think we could try in our workplace. And I hope that a lot of other people found some interesting ideas as well. So that worked really, really well. And I hope this one people will find interesting as well. But before I get on to that, a little bit of a shout out, really. Now, I don't really understand what this is. Now, there's a game called Super Smash Brothers that a lot of people like, but I am all fingers and thumbs when it comes to fighting games, so this is not my thing at all. But however, the people at Mosaic has asked me to kind of do a bit of a shout out, and that shout out is to I need to look up names now because I've just forgotten. Someone called Jack Nelson. Now, Jack is doing a charity fundraising online 128-player Smash Brothers Ultimate Tournament. Now, that is a mouthful, but I think, you know, if that's your thing, then he's trying to raise money, and they've raised £894 so far. So I'm gonna, in a first, I'm gonna press a button, and I'm gonna go like that, and we should have a button appear. Are you impressed? Yeah. I'm impressed. That's the first time. But actually, it's a link to, if you want to register for this, I'll put it in there as well. Then you can go onto this, and there'll be a charity fundraiser. However, if you are, you know, not into Smash Brothers, but you like the idea of supporting the charity, which is the National Emergencies Trust, you can skip the gameplay and just go straight to the giving if you wanted to. So that's something there. So I think that's a great idea. More online tournaments as far as I'm concerned, but maybe games that I have half a hope in playing. as in not fighting games, because I'm not really good at that. But it's good to see that the Mosaic community are doing stuff. Obviously, it's early days with that. Do you know about the digital hub? I'm not going to put you on the spot, Tom. Has Sean mentioned that before?
Vaguely, but
No, so what it is Mosaic it opened at the end of last year, and it's really just starting to get going. And it's a new place to be our digital hub here in Lincoln. There's lots of things going on with the local tech scene, and Digital Lincoln's growing gradually, which is fantastic. But Mosaic is a sort of shared workspace. So, downstairs is where we normally have the Digital Lincoln meetups. And then upstairs, there's a big open plan working area, and then there's offices and bits and bobs like that. So it's a really exciting thing. Really pleased to have it. But then this COVID-19 thing has just turned up, and then we're just trying to carry on, keep the community together, keep people talking to each other, because that's going to be very important. But we will come out the other end of this at some point. And one thing that I think everyone will have learned is a lot more digital skills. So it's forcing people to use webcams. I'm doing my karate classes via Zoom, which is interesting. And there's a lot of people, doing Zoom calls and playing board games with their neighbours and stuff like that. So it will be a different world that we come out of, but maybe a more engaged, a more digital world. So we'll see what happens. But without further ado, I'd like to pass over to you, if that's all right, Tom.
Yeah.
Now, Sean, are you still there? No, he's not there. Okay, so I'm going to do an introduction.
I am. I've just got a bad mic.
You've got a bad mic. So do you want to do a little introduction to Tom, as you know him better than I do?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot, isn't it? Do I really know you? Do I really know you that well, Tom? No, maybe not. Tom has been around the Nottingham tech scene for a number of years and presented at Tech Nottingham and other events. I will let him kind of talk about his career and past in his introduction, but I know you will all kind of really enjoy this talk because I have seen parts of it before. So yes, enjoy.
Excellent.
Thanks,
guys. Great. Right, I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. So Daniel is
I can go like that,
and great.
Yeah,
great. So now you guys should all see a picture of me. So that's me. I'm currently head of technology at a company called Mornish. We're a digital retail agency. I'm also CTO at Identity, and I do some associate. I am an associate consultant at Q5, which is a management consultancy. You can find me online at those links at the bottom, and that's my handle online. What I really like, what I really appreciate is if you've got any questions, if there's anything you particularly enjoy or find useful about this talk, then feel free to tweet at me, to me, about me, or whatever. That would be great. So, but I'm going to talk to you about psychological safety in high-performing teams. What I normally do in this talk, when I'm doing it in person, is I ask everyone how many of you are members of a team, and how many of you lead a team. So maybe in the chat, if you just put a member or lead or neither, then it'd be really useful for us to see what audience we've got. I'm going to switch over to this window. Great. So we've got a bit of everything. Excellent. And a servant leader. Excellent. So yeah. So whether you're a member of a team or you lead a team, I'm going to give you some actionable takeaways to help you get to psychological safety. But first, we're going to look at this boat. This big boat is an Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer of the United States Navy. It's one of the largest missile destroyers in the world. It's 155 meters long, weighs around 9,000 tons, has engines boasting over 100,000 horsepower, and it has more than 100 missiles and torpedoes on board. If you wanted to buy one of these, it'd cost you over $2 billion, but I don't think you're allowed to buy one. This is a Cray XE6 supercomputer. It's got 154,000 processor cores, and it runs at 1.3 thousand teraflops. This one is at the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center in California and costs $70 million, which is fairly affordable compared to the large boat. But this supercomputer and the missile destroyer both have something in common. And that thing, or that woman, is this woman, Grace Hopper. Grace Hopper is one of my leadership role models. So the boat is the USS Hopper, and the computer is the Hopper supercomputer. Grace Hopper was born in 1906. She got a PhD in maths from Yale, became a professor at Vassar University. She tried to join the Navy in 1940, but she was rejected because she was 34 years old. So she joined the reserves instead. And then just a few years later, began her computing career when she worked on the Harvard Mark I team. And it was Grace Hopper that eventually popularized the concept of machine-independent programming languages, which led to COBOL. This is the concept that programming languages should be able to be written and read by humans as well as just machines. She was granted 40 honorary degrees, and she became US Navy Rear Admiral, and she died in 1992. She was also responsible for finding the first ever actual computer bug. When she was working on the Mark II computer in Harvard, which incidentally weighed 25 tons and ran at 8 hertz, she was trying to work out why it wasn't working properly, and she found this moth in relay 70 in panel F, and you can actually see where she took the moth out and stuck it to her notes, and she wrote down first actual case of a bug being found. And she was a champion of improvement. She was a champion of positive change. She said that humans are allergic to change, and they love to say, we've always done it this way. She had a clock on a wall that ran counterclockwise just to prove that things could be done differently. And she emphasized the importance of being human, of people, managing people and leading people. That's why she's featured in this talk. She made the really key point that leadership is far more important than simple management, but they're part of the same need to drive performance. Leadership and management must coexist. They're part of the same realm, but they're not the same thing. You manage things and you lead people. And of course, she's right. She's absolutely right. We don't lead things or manage people. We lead people and we manage stuff. We manage compliance. We manage health and safety, costs, risks, projects. But we lead people through vision, through motivation, through taking accountability and responsibility, through celebrating success, coaching and mentoring. And this is to say that management is part of leadership. Teams, people need a safe environment to operate and work in, safe in health and safety respects, but also psychologically safe, which we'll come to in a minute. And that includes knowing what to do first, what to do second, what to do last, how to do it, what not to do. And that's management. And if you don't or can't manage costs, workloads, risks, and priorities, the team can't work effectively. We've all been in environments where things aren't managed well and you can't work properly, you can't be high performing, and you will not have the trust of the team if you're a leader in that environment. And trust is absolutely key to being a leader. A team cannot operate effectively in an environment where the things are not managed well. But that's the easy bit. Leadership is far bigger in scope, and this is possibly the most important thing we do as leaders, and it's rarely mentioned. We ensure psychological safety for members of the team. This is also known as safety culture. And although Grace Hopper never used this term because it came later, Grace Hopper called this belonging. And fundamentally, it's about being able to speak up, whether that's about a critical safety issue or the behavior of a senior member of staff. And whilst I'd hope that everyone on this talk works in environments where you could raise a health and safety issue without fearing for your own team membership, it's possible that you might not feel the same about raising the raising concerns about the behaviour of a senior member of staff, for example. And this is where safety culture, this is where the concept of safety culture spawns from. This is 1986, this is Chernobyl. And in 1986 in Russia, economic and political interests came before safety. Hierarchy, authority, and blame for mistakes ultimately caused this incident. The Chernobyl plant inherently had an unsafe design, but there was a dramatic fear of authority and certainly no safety culture. What happened on the day of the explosion was that a safety test was planned to carry out a power cut to the controls of Chernobyl, and it had been previously run many times, but never quite successfully. On this day, it had been delayed, and a second shift team came on, who were less familiar with the controls of the plant. But because they didn't have a safety culture, because there was such a fear of authority, they didn't raise their concerns that they didn't fully understand the system. And the test was executed. The test went wrong, and it led to a catastrophic series of events, culminating in 2 explosions: one steam explosion, which destroyed the reactor, and one second nuclear explosion. And as a result of this, on the day itself, 31 people died as a direct result. But up to 4,000 people died in total as a result of the disaster. And the disaster was fundamentally because engineers didn't feel safe enough to raise their concerns. That was in 1986. In 1999, Dr. Amy Edmondson came up with the term psychological safety. And she defined it as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And she found the concept of psychological safety by studying clinical teams in hospitals. And she was comparing the results of high-performing teams and low-performing teams. She was comparing she was comparing the statistics of the outcomes of those teams. And in looking at the outcomes of those teams and the mistakes that they made, she found that the best performing teams made more mistakes, and the worst performing teams made far fewer mistakes. And because this doesn't sound right, she queried the data, and she spent a long time assuming that the data was wrong. What she eventually found out was that the best teams, the best performing clinical teams, admitted more mistakes. And through this came up with the concept of psychological safety, which is a belief that one will not be punished. A team member will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It means that team members can express their creativity, talents, and skills without self-silencing or self-censoring. And it's about being fearless. It's about being fearless as a member of the team, but not in a dumb, I'm not scared to base jump off this skyscraper kind of fearless way. It's an I actually have nothing to fear fearlessness. It involves a great deal of trust, but in practice, psychological safety is far more than trust. So I'd like you all to think about the best team you've been part of, and consider what made that team great. Chances are that team wasn't great because they were super highly skilled, had great expertise or experience, although maybe they did have those things. Chances are they were great, and it was great to be part of that team because they trusted each other and they felt safe to be part of that team. They felt safe to be themselves on that team. Now, after you've thought about the best team you've been part of, have a think about the worst team you've been part of. And I think, whatever your politics, I think it's safe to say that, given I've lost track of the number of people that Trump has sacked from his cabinet, it's safe to say that this team do not have a great deal of psychological safety. They maybe don't feel able to speak up, be themselves in public. They don't maybe trust each other. They certainly can't rely on each other not to act in their own self-interest. In fact, this photo is taken from an article called "How to Survive in Trump's Cabinet," and the last team you want to be on is a team that you have to purely survive in. And in fact, so Google, let's look at the evidence. So why is it good to be psychologically safe? We know it's nice to be psychologically safe. We know we'd like it, but does it make money? Is it good? Is it a good thing for a business to do? So this comes from Google's Project Aristotle. It is research into what makes high-performing teams, the factors that make high-performing teams, and this was done started in 2012. And Google was studying the different factors that made up high-performing teams. So, and because Google is so big, they can study themselves. So they were fundamentally, these 4 factors were part of what make high-performing teams. Impact really matters. Team members need to know that their work matters and creates change. Team members need to have meaning as part of the team. The work needs to be personally important. They need to care about it. Team members need structure and clarity. They need to have clear roles, plans, and goals. And this comes back to management. If things aren't managed well, the teams can't perform well. The teams also need dependability. They need to depend on each other to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. And what was interesting was that they came up with these 4, but they still knew there was something missing, in that some teams, there were still differences between teams that had these 4 factors. And one of the people on the Project Aristotle team found Amy Edmondson's paper back from 1999. Remember, this is from 2012. And in Amy's paper, she describes some ways to find out if your teams have psychological safety. And they carried out this survey, and they found that psychological safety was the most important factor in high-performing teams. Without it, you simply cannot have a high-performing team. But that's not the only source of evidence. This is the State of DevOps report from last year, and this is a report initially by Puppet, and then Dora, and now and then Accelerate, and part of Google over the past 8 years. And all their data shows that an organizational culture that optimizes for information flow, trust, innovation, and risk sharing is predictive of performance. That is to say that psychological safety and safety culture not only prevents disasters like Chernobyl, but it significantly contributes in a key way to software delivery performance, organizational performance, and productivity. It shows that growing and fostering a healthy culture reaps benefits for organizations and the individuals within them. This is also taken from that same study, last year's Accelerate State of DevOps reports. And these are the contributing factors that boost productivity across a full organization, across an organization. And it's things like useful, easy to use tools, internal search, external search, being able to recover from work, low technical debt. But this key pin at the top is psychological safety. But it's not just organizational performance. It's also software delivery team performance. In software delivery teams, you need, in order to achieve high performance, you need things like disaster recovery testing. You need good code maintainability, loosely coupled architecture, monitoring, trunk-based development, automation, clear change processes. But again, key to everything is psychological safety. Now, since then, in fact, if anyone wants to put on the chat, if anyone's read the Phoenix Project, just put your hand up, say you've read it, say what you think of it. This is the sequel to the Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. And in this book, which came out a couple of months ago, Gene highlights these 5 ideals: locality and simplicity, which comes down to code and system architecture; focus, flow, and joy, which is about the process and work delivery; the improvement of daily work, which is continuous improvement; customer focus at the bottom, which is kind of one of the Scrum or Agile principles; and 4, psychological safety. And the reason I highlight this is because psychological safety is becoming part of the mainstream, it's becoming part of the canon, part of the lexicon of certainly of the tech industry. So we know it's good to have, we know we like it, and we know it contributes to high performance. But how do you know if your team possesses psychological safety? So a simple way of doing it is to measure agreement with these statements. You can measure agreement from, say, 1 to 5 with these 8 statements. Fundamentally, they come down to things like, can you take a risk? Can you ask for help? Does your team find the systemic root cause of problems? Can you break the rules? And do other people on your team help you deliver what the team is there for? Now, what you can do is survey your team, and you can continue to survey your team. It's good to keep coming back to this. This isn't a one-shot thing. I've actually got a type form survey that there's a link at the end of this talk that you can go to and grab that type form survey, or you can just make your own from these 8 questions. I've also got baseline data on these 8 questions that I've surveyed across different organizations across the UK. So when you find your metrics for your team, you can compare it against others. Not that it matters whether you're doing better than someone else, but it's nice to know. So by doing that survey, you know where your team are. You know how psychologically safe your team is. But that's no good without knowing how to improve. So how do you improve? And as a leader, this is entirely on you. If you're a leader of a team, this is on you. You can't simply tell people that they operate in a safe environment. You can't tell a team that they are psychologically safe. You need to prove it. You need to do it through awareness, empathy, humility, and servant leadership. But I'm going to give you a few points here to explicitly work towards it. First of all, let's get the basics right. Again, this comes back to management. This is making sure your team know what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what their goals are, what's expected of them. That's absolutely fundamental. Secondly, break the golden rule. The golden rule is treat other people the way you would like to be treated. But don't do that. It's bollocks, because they're not you. Treat other people the way they want to be treated. And as a leader of a team, you can ask your team members how they want to be treated. You can do a management survey. You can do emails to your team asking, how do you like to work? How do you want to have our one-to-ones? What questions do you want me to ask you? What environment do you like to work in? Ask your teams how they like to be treated. Be inclusive in decision making. So allow teams to make their own decision making, provide autonomy. If there's a decision that affects the team, make sure that they're involved in making that decision. Define your team values and behaviors, and this is really important. This is absolutely essential to do as early as possible. If you're building a new team, do this at the start. If you're coming into a team, do this as soon as possible, and work with the team to come up with team values. Distill the team values out of a workshop or an exercise. Find out what they are. Now, chances are, because I know as a leader, you're going to want to define the team values. You're going to want to say, these are your values. But resist that temptation. Allow the team to come up with themselves. And chances are 99% of those values are going to be what you would have come up with anyway. From those values, you can then distill behaviors that represent those values. So, and those behaviors might be things like turning up to meetings on time, or good coding practices, whatever fits your team. Hold retrospectives and do them properly. Actually find the systemic root cause of issues, but also hold them for successes. Don't just hold retrospectives if something goes wrong. Hold a retrospective if something goes really well. Admit fault and do it first. And this is why there's a photo of the Red Arrows behind this, because I was talking to a Red Arrows commander a few years back who gave me a great example of this. And he said after a sortie or mission, whatever they call it, and they land and they walk to their hangar, they sit down and they immediately have a debrief. And the first thing he does as commander is admit one mistake that he made. And what that means is that not only do the rest of the team know that it's safe to admit mistakes, but they actively want to. They actively want to find a mistake that they made and admit it, because they want to emulate their leader. Invite feedback. And in fact, I've written feedback there, but I don't mean feedback. I hate the word feedback. Ask for advice. You're doing the same thing. Asking for advice is more future focused and positive. Feedback is so negative and past focused. Feedback tends to be, you didn't do that very well, or you could have done that better. Advice is, maybe in future you could try doing it this way. So advice is far more valuable. Show vulnerability and emotion. One of the key things about psychological safety is that people need to be able to be themselves on a team, and showing emotion and vulnerability is part of that. And unless you as a leader show vulnerability and emotion, the people on your team won't feel able to do so. Kind of on the flip side of that is being firm with negative behaviors, because this is really important. This shows that members of the team that they are safe from the bad behavior of others, and that these behaviors that you defined and the expectations that everyone has of each other will be upheld. And things like everything from bullying to turning up to meetings late. Be really firm and set clear boundaries. You get the behavior that you tolerate. Financial and job security. These are really important. Financial security allows people to focus, because they're not worried about money. They're not worried about other things. If they've got financial security, they can genuinely focus on their job. If they've got job security, it means they can take risks, they can innovate, and they can gamble on stuff. And that's where innovation occurs. That's where the real competitive edge occurs. So by providing both financial and job security, you're enabling much higher performance of the members of your team. Finally, be patient, because this is not a one shot. This is not a thing you just do once and then you've got it. You've got psychological safety. You can tick that off and you're done. This is consistent, constant behavior. It is being a leader. But even doing these things isn't going to get you there in one fell swoop. There are 4 stages of psychological safety. And the first stage is inclusion safety. This is just being a member of a team. This is being included. We need to be accepted as part of a team before we can do anything else. And this is just safe to be a member of a team. The second stage, when there's a higher degree of psychological safety, becomes the learning stage. And this is where we learn and we grow. This means we can ask questions, we can give and receive feedback, we can experiment, and we can make mistakes. The third stage is contributor safety, and this requires yet another higher degree of psychological safety. This is being able to participate as a member of the team, contributing your ideas and suggestions, and using your unique talents and abilities to make a difference. And it requires a high degree of safety, because by contributing your ideas, you're exposing yourself to the threat of ridicule or criticism. Finally, challenger safety. This is the highest level of challenger safety, of psychological safety rather. This means being able to challenge the way the team works, challenge the decisions of anyone else in the team, including the leader. And that takes a high degree of psychological safety. What's interesting is that if someone on the team goes straight to number 4, goes straight to challenger, when the rest of the team are not feeling as safe as that, it feels awful. I think we've all been in teams where someone is acting like a challenger, but no one else is ready for it yet. And that is from a book that's just come out by Timothy Clark, who's a great guy, and I think this is now available on Amazon. The last time I did this talk, it wasn't available, so go and have a look on Amazon. Good book. Many of you will be familiar with this model. This is the Tuckman model, and my point here is these stages of psychological safety, and the fact that it takes at least 6 months for a team to enter high performance, which is this performing state up in the top right here. Usually it takes 18 months or more. And the 4 stages are forming, storming, norming, and performing. At the forming stage, people are finding roles and bonding within the team, so we're getting to know each other. And storming is the phase where strong leadership is required, and that leadership sets direction, strategy, and roles. The storming stage, is where you need to set those values and behaviors. Once you've set that, teams can move into norming. This is where teams become more autonomous and self-directive. And it's at this point where you can start really building psychological safety and a culture of experimentation, which allows you to get to the performing stage, which is where you've got a continuous improvement state. What's interesting about this cycle is that invariably changes in the team, people leaving or joining or other organizational changes, mean that teams tend to cycle around this storming and norming phases. And often teams rarely or never get to performing because they're too busy floating around the storming and norming, where too many changes are being made to the team, or too many structural changes made to the organization. To get to performing, you need a certain level of consistency. Building that consistency allows you to build psychological safety, but it's not enough just to have psychological safety. So we've established it's crucial to high performance, but there are other factors required to achieve high performing teams. And one of those is motivation and accountability. This is if you take nothing away from this talk, apart from this, then you've done a good job. So consider each quadrant. Now, I and probably most of you have been a member of teams in each of these quadrants. Down at the bottom left, we've got apathy. This is where you've got no psychological safety or very little psychological safety, but you've also got very little motivation and accountability. So your teams don't feel safe, team members don't feel safe, but they also don't care. Why would they care? They don't need to do anything. So it's just apathetic. Now, if you're a good leader and you build psychological safety without building motivation and accountability, you move people into the comfort zone. And this is a great place to be. This is a really nice, comfy place to be. This can feel like a high performing team. This can certainly be a very pleasurable place to be in a team, but you're not necessarily high performance yet because you're not driven to deliver. Now, if you build that motivation and accountability to deliver without building psychological safety, the team will end up in this bottom right quadrant, this anxiety quadrant. This is also the high churn quadrant. This is where people leave. In the anxiety quadrant, this is where people leave the team. And of course, when someone leaves a team, you don't really get them back. Teams that you see most often in this quadrant are like sales teams. This is what I call the estate agent quadrant, because teams who are competitive with each other, and they have high motivation, high accountability, but very little psychological safety. Now, if you combine great motivation and accountability and psychological safety, you'll end up in high performance, where teams and members are safe to take risks, but they're also motivated to deliver as much as they can. That's where high performance occurs. Some of the crucial things to remember about this chart is that it's far easier to move down than it is to move up, a bit like snakes and ladders. Psychological safety is hard to build, but it's easy to break. So a good strategy to employ if you're building a team is to take them, and often you'll find if you're coming into a team, you'll often find they're either in anxiety or apathy. So take them into the comfort zone first. Move them into the top left corner, that comfort zone, then move them into high performance. Because it's far better to take them from comfort zone to high performance and steer well away from anxiety than it is to risk dipping into this anxiety quadrant, because it's at that point, as I said, that people leave the team and you may not recover from that quadrant. One of the points about this chart is it's not about lowering performance or quality standards. Psychological safety isn't. It's about raising standards. But it's about raising standards whilst removing as much risk as possible from those people trying to achieve those standards. It's getting to be able to fail fast. And this high performance zone is also called the learning zone. This is where, in fact, if we're talking about technology teams, this is where DevOps practices and resilience engineering practices come in, which we'll talk about in a second. What's a final point about this quadrant is that you can workshop this with your team. This isn't something you need to keep secret from your team. You can show your team this. You can put it up on a whiteboard or something, and you can ask your team members where they feel they are now on this chart. You can do that anonymously or publicly. You can ask them where they were 6 months ago, where they are now, and where they want to get to in the future. And by doing that, you can have an honest and explicit conversation about how the team is going to get there. I'm going to skip this slide and that slide, but we're going to move on to resilience engineering. This is, so in order for tech teams to feel safe, they also need to feel safe in carrying out their technical responsibilities. And this requires making changes, and changes incur risk. Systems thinking, shifting left, automated testing, site reliability engineering, and resilience engineering all contribute to the safety of individuals who need to make changes. This is essentially where DevOps comes in, allows fast, safe changes to be made to systems, and for systems to respond to external pressures such as high load or attacks without failing, or at least gracefully failing. The point about this is that to build psychological safety in a technology team is fundamentally part of a DevOps and of a technical drive for excellence. So this is where the soft skills of leadership and the hard technical skills of DevOps and resilience engineering really mesh and come together. And this is the slide that well, it's 20 to 8. I added this about an hour and 15 minutes ago. So I want to talk briefly about distributed teams, because suddenly we're all part of a distributed team. Distributed work is making us realize that we have to be more deliberately, more proactively open. We have to be explicit in sharing our ideas, questions, and concerns, because we can't just overhear what's happening around the office anymore. We have to work a little bit harder to share what we're thinking and build this psychological safety. It is undeniably harder to build. And these are some of the things I've come up with or I'm aware of that help build psychological safety in distributed teams. One of the first points here is focusing on outcomes, not outputs. Outputs is things like lines of code written, or story points completed, or words written. That means nothing without an outcome. And invariably, we find ourselves managing teams based upon outputs. But focus on the outcome, focus on the business outcome, which is satisfying customers, delivering what the customer wants. That's ultimately what's most important. Certainly don't focus on inputs at this stage. Don't focus on hours logged, because that's the way to anxiety. Secondly, build a culture of appreciation. Always thank people and congratulate people for success. Embrace routine and ritual. Routine means that people understand where the boundaries of work are, and people feel safer in knowing what work is. Ritual is a great way of also building team cohesion. Establish work boundaries. This is really important because suddenly work has entered our home lives. Suddenly work is at home. So we need to find other ways to set those boundaries between work and home life. And that might be times, it might be practices, it might be ensuring that phones are turned off after 6 o'clock. Use the many species of video call. And there's some great examples here where you've got things like a round table, or a free room where people just sign into during the day, and you don't need to speak, it's just there. And if you do speak up, people can hear you. It's like having people at your desk in your office. Don't end a video call until everyone has spoken. It's really important to maintain inclusivity in distributed teams, and it's important to remember that if you're not being actively inclusive, potentially you're being passively exclusive. So try to make sure that everyone speaks on a video call. Adopt Hanlon's razor, and this is a great example. This is Hanlon's razor is the assumption that if someone communicates with you in a way that you think, well, that's rude, assume it's a miscommunication rather than a deliberate effort to be rude. Hanlon's razor means it's always assuming the best of someone. Emojis and GIFs can be a great way of conveying emotion. So use GIFs all the time. And finally, put your own oxygen mask on first. If you don't look after yourself in distributed teams, you can't effectively help or lead others. So crucially, coming back to psychological safety, it's still unusual. It's still not the norm, which is why it's one of the few things that can endow a competitive advantage. So even if you're not in charge of the team, you can foster these behaviors in this culture by doing three things. Firstly, frame work as a learning problem, not an execution problem. The outcome of work should be knowing how to do it better next time. Acknowledge your own infallibility. Now, you might be an expert in your field, but you don't know everything and you get things wrong. So if you admit it when you do, you allow others on your team to do the same. Finally, model curiosity. Ask a lot of questions. This creates a need for voice on your team because by asking questions, people have to speak up. Now, Grace got rejected by the Navy when she was 34, but nobody had to tell Grace that she was leadership material in order for her to become the amazing leader that she did. You don't have to be told you're a leader to be a leader. That link there actually takes you to a page on my website, which I need to update, but has a lot of the content that I've talked about in today's talk. So if we switch back to face view, guys,
I will just type it up and stick it in the chat.
Fantastic.
So, I'm just checking my spelling before I do that. There we go. There we go. That's that one there. That's just at the bottom of the chat now. If that's the one, Tom.
That should be it. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Should we kick off with questions, comments?
Well, can I jump in and
Sure.
well, you know, yeah, really good. I was like writing loads of notes. I mean, because what you've got there is you've actually distilled, you know, some really interesting ideas, you know, that have been washing around my head. One of the things that, you know, you brought up the red arrows earlier. They're quite, you know, obviously based here in Lincoln. But one of the things that they did in a documentary that I saw was, you know, you rightly identified that the commander says what they've done wrong, but they don't say, you know, Fred, or, you know, was slow there. They use the sort of third person. So they use, you know, Red 2. Red 2 was slow to do this, or Red 2 was fast into that. So it's not saying about you, it's saying about, you know, how you can make that change. And it's just like little tweaks that create a culture. And I think you're absolutely bang on there. The other side of it is when it goes wrong, you know. So when you have a culture that people don't ask questions and don't feel like they can put their hand up, and I can't remember who shared it. I think it might have been Paul Elliott that shared the lessons to be learned from the TSB migration failure. It's a really good article, actually. I'll put it on a bookmark. And one of the things there was they had TSB was a catastrophic IT failure when they launched their new system, but they had a culture which was basically don't ask, don't tell. You know, so if the developers didn't mention that hadn't been tested properly, then it's fine because no one's going to raise the fact that hasn't been tested properly, and it's not their problem. You know, because no one had the confidence to, you know, hold their hand up and say it's not right, you know, and only afterwards, later on, did they find out that the culture wasn't right. So yeah, very, very interesting. I'll put that TSB one on there as well. So does anyone want to put any questions to Tom in the chat? This is where it's all very quiet.
Yeah.
A lot of people there, kind of like me, furiously writing away notes, but obviously have got the other thing that I found, which was it's this rework with Google thing, because it's a really good website, actually. There's loads of stuff, and this one I hadn't actually seen. This one is the closest one that I've seen to this is actually a print guide, but on there, you know, it's got a lot of the stuff that you're talking about effective teams and psychological safety. So yeah, that's quite a as well. So
yeah, there's some fantastic stuff on that website. Yeah, ton of good stuff on there.
yeah. So how do you feel that? I mean, we're in changing times, you know, and so could there be a part in kind of making safety culture a way to bounce back, you know, so that teams that are more resilient, teams that are more prepared to hold their hand up and take responsibility? Do you think, you know, that this is going to be, you know, not burying your head in the sand, but coming up with innovative ideas?
I think there's a couple of points there. I think partly the teams that pull through this, the teams that get through this and actually succeed, are going to be the teams that already had a good deal of psychological safety. They already had a handle on some of this stuff, and so the best performing organizations and the best performing teams that come out of this are going to be teams that were already doing it well. The other side is that this is forcing managers and leaders to start doing this role, because you can't micromanage. You can't do poor leadership remotely. I mean, it's harder to do good leadership remotely, but it's really hard to do bad leadership remotely. So yeah, it's forcing people to start getting better. My AirPods are just running out, so let me just see if I can pull them out without killing it. So I'm going to keep on talking. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain norm which is like the office norms that you can fall back into when you are working remotely. That, you know, all of the team, if you give them the tools and the confidence to do that, you know, can take a bit more ownership, you know, and rather than just to be able to say, oh, what's next, you know, it's actually people are all working separately, they are working together, but there is an opportunity to give people more autonomy, more decision making. But hand in hand with that is being able to say, right, well, I asked you to make a decision, but I also didn't give you all the information. So you made a decision based on the information that you had at the time, which actually wasn't the outcome that we needed. However, I can still applaud you for making a call which was based on what you thought the right thing to do was. You know,
yeah,
it's getting that right, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's about praising the approach and praising the intent, and valuing the outcome. But what's important is that people work hard to achieve it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Oliver's come on the chat saying, thanks, Tom, really interesting and much to take away here. So yeah, I absolutely agree. So quite a lot of reading material as well. Well, we've done an hour, so you've done pretty well. I'm not going to leave it to lots of people to take questions away, because they're probably looking at all the reading material. But I just wanted to say thank you very much, Tom. I thought that was really insightful, really enjoyable. And now this is going to be recorded, so it automatically gets recorded. So if it comes back to me in about I'll give you about half an hour. Right, the audio went a bit funny there.
Yeah, my opinion. So.
Right, before we have technical, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Tom, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Digital Lincoln Talk. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Right. Be live or back in the green room. my affirmation. Goodbye's a crown now. Also, Ricky Bridge as feel or otherwise get in touch with any questions, ask for contact, so anything else full. Are you still on the call?
What's that?